Join us on Patreon and become part of our journey to uncover history's untold stories. Your support helps us create in-depth content, bring hidden narratives to life, and keep history alive for everyone.
In the golden light of the highlands of Ethiopia, there exists a truth far older than the Vatican, deeper than the catacombs of Rome, and more mysterious than the scrolls buried in the deserts of Qumran. It is whispered not in Latin nor Greek, but in Guizi, the ancient language of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, and hidden in manuscripts carefully preserved for over 1,000 years in the stone monasteries that cling to cliffs like sanctuaries in the sky. These texts, long overlooked by Western biblical scholars, claim to reveal not only what happened to Jesus Christ during the so-called lost years of his life, those unaccounted decades between his childhood and the beginning of his public ministry, but they also dare to retell the story of Eden itself, suggesting that perhaps the serpent, far from being a deceiver, was actually a revealer of divine truth. To the faithful guardians of these ancient books, such interpretations are not heresy, but heritage. In Western tradition, the New Testament tells us of Jesus at age 12, teaching in the temple. And then silence. Nothing more is recorded until he reappears at 30, baptized by John and declaring the kingdom of God at hand. This mysterious gap of nearly 2 decades has puzzled theologians for centuries. Where did Jesus go? What did he learn? What shaped the Messiah before he walked the hills of Galilee with fishermen and tax collectors? While the canonical Gospels are mute, the Ethiopian texts offer tantalizing answers. They speak of a young man who journeyed south, not east, not west, but into Africa, into Ethiopia, a land of kings, mystics, and ancient wisdom that predates even Solomon. The Kebra Nagast, one of Ethiopia's most revered religious texts, revered as much as the Bible itself within Ethiopian Christianity, offers indirect but potent clues. It claims Ethiopia was not only visited by the Queen of Sheba, but was home to the Ark of the Covenant, carried from Jerusalem by her son Menelik I. The presence of such a powerful artifact suggests Ethiopia had long been regarded as a sacred land, a spiritual refuge. It would not be far-fetched, then, to imagine that a young spiritual seeker named Yeshua, Jesus, might have sought refuge, knowledge, and preparation in the land where the Ark once rested. Some manuscripts preserved at Debre Damo and the monastery of Abuna Garimus speak cryptically of a stranger of light who came from the north bearing divine insight and was taught the secrets of the cosmos by Ethiopian elders and monks of a desert sect known only as the Watchers of Time. This stranger was said to have studied ancient medicine, celestial cycles, and the oral traditions of Enoch and Melchizedek, figures central to Ethiopian theology, yet mostly marginalized or obscured in Western doctrine. The Book of Enoch, preserved completely only in Guizi, was a cornerstone of Ethiopian religious understanding, and was said to have been taught to this mysterious northern visitor. In it, angels descend to earth not as rebels but as teachers, offering humans knowledge of agriculture, astronomy, and healing. This sheds a whole new light on the Eden narrative, for it was knowledge, not sin, that was passed on. In this context, the serpent in the garden becomes a symbol of awakening, not corruption. Some Ethiopian writings, echoing Gnostic and pre-Talmudic interpretations, suggest that the serpent was an agent of divine wisdom rather than a fallen enemy. In these texts, Eve is not portrayed as the bringer of death, but the first human to reach toward enlightenment. The fruit she tasted was not disobedience, but initiation. It is even suggested that without Eve's courage, humanity might have remained in a static, childlike state forever, never maturing, never learning, never growing into the image and likeness of the divine. According to Ethiopian theological commentaries that date back to the early Aksumite Church, founded as early as the 4th century AD, and likely drawing from even older oral and Judaic traditions, Jesus not only came to understand this truth but embodied it. They teach that Jesus did not come to undo the fall of Adam and Eve, but to fulfill it, to complete the divine plan of human transformation that began when the first humans dared to taste knowledge. This interpretation reshapes the very foundation of Christian theology. The cross becomes not only a symbol of redemption, but a symbol of rebirth into divine consciousness, a second Eden, where wisdom, not blind obedience, is the path back to God. These lost years, Ethiopian texts argue, were not merely a preparation period for Jesus. They were essential to his transformation from man to Messiah. He meditated in the caves of the Simeon Mountains. He learned from the Beta Israel, the ancient Ethiopian Jewish community whose Torah traditions predate the Babylonian Talmud. He walked the sacred stones of Aksum and learned the secrets of the Queen of Sheba's dynasty. He was baptized in the waters of Lake Tana long before his ritual baptism in the Jordan. It is perhaps no coincidence that early Christian monasticism began not in Europe but in Africa, in Egypt and Ethiopia, where desert fathers and mystics withdrew from the world not out of fear but in pursuit of divine knowledge. The Ethiopian monastic texts, such as the Mashafakidis, speak of transfiguration as a process, not a single event. Jesus, they say, was the first of many to complete the journey of the Christ one. And it was in Ethiopia, unconquered, uncolonized, untouched by the Roman imperial church, that this truth was preserved. For centuries, these texts remained unknown to the Western world, buried in manuscripts guarded by monks who believed they were protecting not just knowledge but the destiny of humanity. It was only in the 20th century, as scholars and explorers began translating Guizi manuscripts, that fragments of this alternate story began to surface. Yet even now, most of it remains hidden, locked away in monasteries only accessible by foot, sometimes by rope, and sometimes only by the invitation of monks who speak little of their treasures to outsiders. What would it mean for Christianity if these Ethiopian revelations were true? If Jesus had indeed walked Africa's soil as a young man, been initiated into mysteries older than Jerusalem, and returned not just as a rabbi, but as a master of hidden truths? What would it mean for the story of Eden if the serpent was not Satan, but Sophia, divine wisdom, beckoning humanity to awaken? The West may dismiss these writings as apocryphal, but in the Ethiopian highlands, they are sacred canon. In their tradition, Jesus was not only the Son of God, but the Son of Africa. He was the bridge between Eden and Golgotha, between the knowledge of Eve and the resurrection of humanity. In this telling, he did not come to condemn the world, but to lift the veil, and Ethiopia, in all its ancient glory, was where the lifting began.